So the first thing is you need to at least have a previous some record to show where you've been in the past 1 week, what you've done, any progress, kama you've executed winning trades. Hata kama it's a big loss, well and good, at least so long as you're making some effort, so long as you're making some steps, some baby steps. Okay, so supply and demand zones. So we're going to look at a small recap on support and resistance. Then we're going to look at what is meant by supply and demand zones. Then the relations between supply and demand, and resistance and support. Then I'm going to give you a way of how to trade supply and demand zones. Okay. Then we're going to look at, not look at, but I'm going to give you something to go and look at. That is the reversal candlesticks, candlesticks in general. Then we're going to look at the 75 candlestick rule. Fibo, we're going to look at the basics, okay? So we're not going to go into so much detail, but we're going to at least look at some logical details as to how Fibo works, okay? Then linear regression, okay? Yeah, that will be it for today. So let's get started. The first thing is we're going to open our charts, okay? So by now, I hope you guys are comfortable with kufungua orders, kuchora trend lines, kuchora supports na resistance, okay? So we said ukitaka kuchora support na resistance, you use this horizontal line, okay? So drop it anywhere, okay? So that is what we have for GBP USD. On the 4-hour chart, you can zoom in and zoom out to get some better positions kama hapa, okay? But anyway, all you need to understand ni kuchora supports na resistance, that's number 1. Then ikikuja to trend lines, we use this trend line hapa, this line. You just draw the best fit. Tulisema one thing about trend lines is you find the best fit, okay? Then different time frames. So we can draw it here. A short trend, but still working. So this is a downtrend. The other thing you guys need to know is difference here: downtrend, uptrend, na consolidation, na ranging markets. Okay. So with that being said, supply and demand zones. In other words, in simple terms, supply and demand zones are the supports na resistance zones. Okay, they offer support na resistance. But what happens for markets? For market name, you'll never find one specific point, Mali, you can place your support na resistance. Okay, so what happens ni it's a range. So in this case, tunaweza sema this point, see this between these two trend lines, between these two support na resistance, kuna some sort of a supply ama demand zone. Okay, it's a range. Market inafika in a certain position before you make a move. Okay, so I hope you guys can see this. So supply is the same as your resistance, demand is the same as your support. Okay, so in this way, if there's a lot of supply, market likely could drop in price. Okay, but if there is a lot of demand, market likely kupanda in price. Okay, so that is the supply and demand zone. You don't need to understand that what's the difference between supply and demand zone. So what you need to understand is you're drawing an area of interest that is acting as support and resistance. Hope I'm making sense. So that is what we call the supply and demand zone. This area, because market imekuwa ikikuja to around that zone, then what happens? The market turns, ama market break out come at this point, so supply becomes demand. Not important sana at which is which. Okay, so what you need to know, the logic of support becomes resistance. Okay, so let's look at another currency. So okay, yeah, want to lead Shachora, but let's do this. Delete everything. Okay, then we're going to remove this so that we can have a clear chart. So this is what we have to realize market in a sideways manner. Okay, in that sideways movement, to connect 2 points on top of each chart. Okay, so you can see this market will bounce kutoka hii point hapa chini. Previously we can see this. Okay, then in this case market ilikuja mpaka hapa juu before ishuke, and in this case market ilikuja mpaka inside, no, it's inside that zone. In short, unachora your support na resistance but within a range. Ni support na resistance but it's within a certain zone. So you can see from down here tuko na this point. Okay, then we have the lowest market ilienda. Okay, so with that in mind, tuko sure tuko na hii point. You see all this, we have this point. Hope you guys can see this. So tuko na this point enye hatujui market itafika wapi exactly ndio iturn, but tuko sure market ikifika around this point the market is going to be resisted. And then tuko na hii point hapa chini. Okay, enye ina act kama our support, but it's a zone. You can see that it's a big area. So what happens ni market inaweza shuka. Yes, itashuka. We're certain itashuka, but you're not so certain which point kwa hii market itaturn. Which point kwa this zone hatujui kama itashika hapa iturn, but based on this inaweza kuja mpaka hapa before iturn. Okay, so you get the logic behind supply na demand zones. Okay, so with that in mind, ukitaka kuchora, so how do you draw this supports na ama supply na demand zones? Okay, then when it comes to supply na demand zones, I would say use them more kuliko hata supports na resistance. Anyway, I'm going to explain that in a few. So tunataka kuchora this supply na demand zone. Okay, hii ya chini na hii ya juu. So what I'll tell you ni, the first thing is, let's just delete this. The first thing is you come with your supports na resistance, drop them. Please do not expect market imeko make some impact. You see that? So that's point 1. Then tuko na hii ya chini. You see that? So tukiwa na that, what's going to happen ni unataka kuchora these two. So there are a few options. Unaweza tumia trend lines, that's one. But to make it easier for you, kuja insert, then go to shapes. Okay, then select rectangle. Then between your support na resistance, hizo lines zenye umeweka, just come drag and drop. Okay, so insert shapes, rectangle, tunataka kuchora hii ya chini from this point to this point. Okay, so that is what you have. And then just delete your support and resistance lines. Okay, delete. So this is what you have, and it's very simple. Market tuko sure ita move juu, tuko sure ita move chini. Okay, tuko sure ita move juu. You see that? Tuko certain market ina move in between our supply na demand zone, irrespective of points zenye ina hit. You see that? So in this case, what you're going to do ni utaingilia market hapa. You're going to sell from this point. Okay, hautaangalia market ati imefika hapa ndani. Just a minute. You won't look at the market imefika hapa, that's why you're going to take your sell. No, you're not certain kama inaweza panda mpaka huku ama itashuka. So you wait for a confirmation hapa below. Okay, same case to this, utaingilia market hapa. Same case to this. We're going to sell ikifika hapo. Okay, so that is a sell. Okay, so when do we buy? Hii market ukiingilia buy hapa, make money, then this tutabaia hapa. The reason you're supply na demand on some advantages supply na demand ni itakutoa from this big risk ya kuingia market ikiwa hapa, then ikudanganye market ime break out of this, so you go for a sell, and then what happens? Unajipata na a big loss. Okay, so we have that, then this we buy at this point. So you can see the logic ni basically tuna trade that supply na demand zone katikati. So you can see this. Okay, this is what happened last Jana, actually. I think it's yesterday or the day before yesterday. So you can see this. Okay, and then when it comes to these trades, okay, you can see what happens. But the thing about supply and demand zone, what you really need to understand about supply and demand zone, what you need to understand about supply and demand zone, in case they don't play according to what you expect, there's always room for you to at least exit the trade. What I mean, in case you trade na expect ishuke na ikuje breakout, okay, I won't, at least I'll be careful, ama nitakuwa na more options kuliko just waiting for that loss. Okay, so within this supply zone, if you don't see a reversal candlestick na uliingilia market hapa, that's where the reversal candlesticks come in. Okay, but hiyo ni way after, ama the next lesson you're going to look at it. Okay, so within his zone, we'll be looking at reversal candlesticks. That's a new term, but tutaangalia what they mean. Okay, then this point, you can see this candlestick and you'll form hapa. That was enough confirmation for you to sell at this point, somewhere below hapa. Okay, hii iliform before, you can see from the 1 hour, iliform before, you can see this. This is a clear definition of a reversal candlestick na tuko certain hiyo market tuna expect itashuka because imeform kwa supply na demand zone. Okay, so okay, because the next thing we're going to look at ni candlesticks. You guys really need to understand these reversal candlesticks. Now what happens ni utapata market, yes, iko in between a trend, but tumepata a reversal candlestick ama kuna formation ya candlestick yenye ni symbolic in between. Yeah, I've seen an example. Something kama hii ya reversal inakwambia it's going to reverse, but what happens ni it's still within our supply na demand zone. Okay, so what happens ni in the end of the day tutakuwa tuna focus on that supply na demand zone because that is the general trend. Okay, we are not looking at easy pullbacks within the market. Okay, they might be symbolic, but either way kama uliingilia market hapa, then you're still safe because tuna expect your market bado itabuy. Okay, and then when it comes to easy supply and demand zone, after you enter, you always place your stop loss above it. Okay, so in this case kama tungeingia sell, tungeka a stop loss itu above it. Okay, it's more technical than this, but what you need to understand ni your stop loss should be above your supply and demand zone. So you can see kama tuliingia market hapa, which we did, kama tuliingia market earlier, kama tuliingilia market hapa, sorry about that, tuliingilia market at this point, immediately time ili bounce from that trend line, and then market ika pull back inside the supply and demand zone. You can see our stop loss bado ingekuwa safe. Okay, and right now the trade is running around 100 pips roughly. So I hope I'm making sense. I hope mnaelewa what we mean by supply and demand zones. Okay, and then there's, let's take for example this. Yeah, okay, easy chart. So we have this. Okay, there's an uptrend, some sort of an uptrend, not the best fit, so let's change that. We have this, we have that point, then tuko na hii point, you can see that. But then ukiangalia kwa hii market, we have a bit of a lower point ilikama ikaform. Okay, so we can adjust this, adapt na this higher point and take this as a zone ama as a supply zone. Okay, so insert shapes, rectangle. Okay, then you have that point. So we can delete easy trend lines. Oh no, sorry about that. So we have something inakaa hivi. Okay, then we have some kamini trend hapa, which is not the best, but at least you can see what's happening. But from this supply and demand zone, then we have V point here. See this point? So tunaweza ongeza. So as in whatever you see, draw. Inaweza kuwa complex at first because you don't really don't know mali unachora this supply and demand zones. But what I'll tell you ni anywhere you spot a resistance ama you spot resistance ama inaitwaje support, it's a point unaweza weka supply na demand zone ama this rectangle. Okay, so we have that. So based on this, we are certain hii market 90% chances inakuja somewhere hapa. It's that simple. So you sell at the demand, ni demand or supply, yeah, and then you buy at the supply zone. Whichever, you don't really need to understand that this is the supply or this is the demand. Then you can imagine kama ulisell at this point and you had your stop loss right above. Okay, not the best example, but exactly somewhere hapa. Okay, so you can see yes, ilirudi ikaritrace mpaka kwa that zone, but then market still continued to sell. Okay, then this point yenye ingekuwa our target because market ilihit your point before, ingekuwa we are watching for a reversal at this point, na tungekuwa na enough confirmation from this point if tungeona ama if market inge come kuanza kubuy. Hope I'm making sense. Juu nasikia naongea vitu zangu. And then tuko na this point. Okay, so this, the reason haikufika chini ni you have to keep in mind kuna trend line, we have this point na this point, then you can see why the market haikushuka mpaka kwa supply na demand zone. Okay, so hii point you have to be keen of a few points. Tuko na this. Okay, then we have this tulisema ukianza kuchora hizi vitu, draw as many as possible. So lazima we pay attention to hii point. I hope siwapeleki mbio. So lazima we pay attention to around hakaka zone, this ka point hapa hivi, because of V down, this some sort of trend line iko hapa inaenda na chini, which is not so, haina so much impact, but at least you need to be careful nayo, okay? And then if at all ita break this point, tuna expect your market ikuje mpaka hapa, okay? But if we see this price bouncing from hii point ianze kushuka, tuna expect your market ita form something almost similar, but yes, some sort of consolidation. Long term tunaweza ona hapa, short term tunaweza ona imerudi mpaka around hapa, or even iendelee chini, okay? It's a game of uncertainties, but once you have something, you can always make money out of it. So 10 more minutes. Any questions on supply and demand? Any questions? So this is gold. Let's just look at gold. So the first thing, tunaenda kwa higher time frames. What is the general trend? Oh, this is not gold. This is Australian USD. Yeah, so we have this. Okay. Then do we have anything? Yeah, something of the sort. Not the best, but at least you can see. Then tuko na hii point. See that? Tunaweza enda daily. Okay. So based on this, then tuko na hii point. This is a symbolic point. So, but let's wait and see what happens hapa. So yeah, daily, that's what we have. Then to realize we have some sort of an uptrend, a mini uptrend somewhere hapa. Hope you guys can see it. So yeah, with that in mind, tuko certain market yetu inakuja somewhere around hapa. Okay, hapa hivi. Before anything happens, ama inaweza reverse at this point, but we're not certain. But tunaweza insert that ka supply and demand zone around hapo. That way itakupatia some room and some space kujua hii market iko ina point of impact, ama there is a lot of uncertainty on where the market is likely to go ikifika at this point. Okay, but you can see what is happening. There's an uptrend of some sort. Okay, so tunaweza expect hii market ita reverse mpaka kwa trend line, then maybe, and yeah, not I say maybe, most probably endelea kubuy mpaka kwa hiyo mpaka kwa this zone. Okay, any questions at all? Any questions? Kuchora supply, demand zones, trend line, anything? Yeah, you can see this, but I'd already drawn it. So from this tunaweza na market imekuwa ikishuka mpaka this point, na kuna this point, but tutachora hapo because of here. Okay, so our insert, then shapes, rectangle, just draw your point. So the most important thing about supply and demand zone, ama what you need to understand ni supply and demand zones act kama support na resistance long term. Okay, so this is what we have. Okay, so you can see what has been happening. You sell kwa trend line, you buy kwa supply zone, same thing. Okay, so yeah, that's it. Then ukitaka kudelete your supply na demand zone because inaweza kata ukidouble click immediately, what you do, right click on your chart, then objects list, then from the rectangle you select. Okay, so you can see una select this right hapa mwisho. Okay, then close. Then you can either edit it, okay, as a drag depending on your view on what's going to happen kwa market. So if that's it, ama ikiwa selected hivi, you can just press delete and it's gone. Okay, questions? So that is basically supply and demand zones. Then the other thing about supply and demand zones, some hack you can use ni ukirealize market iko in a certain trend, let's say okay, I don't know which currency can you use. Ukirealize market ina move hivi, you can always use points zenye market ina turn as your support na ama your supply zones. See this, badala ya kuweka support na resistance, just use it short term. See that? So yeah, then to make it easy for you, could you just come to this point kwa this kaba ama whatever you call it, then right click hapa mwisho, okay, then customize, then come and look for your rectangle, then insert, then close. So that way itakuwa easily accessible kwa chart yako. Okay, any questions? Any questions at all? Yes,
I have a question. I wanted to ask, when you're doing your resistance and support, kama TF ina come into play?
Always yes. Always yes. The higher the time frame, the stronger the point. But ukichora kama saizi hapa, they are weekly, then daily bado itakuwa impactful. 4 hours itakuwa bado iko na impact. See this. So either way, it doesn't really matter kama umechora kwa 15 minutes ama kwa 30 minutes. Your point bado, there's that general trend. Na the higher the time frame, the more likely itakuwa na effect kwa market. So nime-explain kitu ulikuwa unauliza.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Anyone? Okay, sawa. 5 minutes break, then tukirudi we're going to look at the 75 candlestick rule, then Fibonacci. We're going to at least tuziharakisha, then tuko na linear regression na Elliot's wave. Yeah. So guys, have a good one. 5 minutes, then we're back.
Fibonacci. Yeah, bye.
Mtu anaendianga hapa ni wapi meeting wase. Oh yeah.